quantify that is how many times should a job be assigned? Well, these are unique jobs that just need to be assigned one time. Okay, they're not recurring things, they're unique, and we just assign the job one time. Now, one of the differences that you see in a transportation problem and an assignment problem is that in a transportation problem, the things that are filled in down here are like, ship 50 from here to there, and 100, and 300, and 1,000, and 22, okay? Whatever it is, that's what you see down here. Some zeros, because you don't use those paths, and others that have numbers that are telling you how many to ship along that path. What you see in an assignment problem is typically that it is either assigned or not assigned. And so what you see in these changing cells for assignment problems are ones and zeros. 1 if you assign this to them, 0 if you do not assign this job to them. Okay, so that's what you're going to see for the most part there. Let's go back. So as now you could be shading these things as we're talking, because eventually you're going to have those shaded. What do we do here, okay, in order to figure out how many jobs each person, that this person was assigned? Okay, what do I do in that cell? What was that? Are you saying add them?
Since it's zeros and ones.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm summing it. I'm doing a sum of that because it's going to be zeros and ones, because I have to make sure they don't get more than 2 jobs. Because that's my thing. That's my constraint on that, is that they don't get more than 2 jobs. Okay. So I'm going to sum up that row and make sure that, I'm going to sum up every row to make sure of that. So what I do here, I of course copy all the rest of the way down here. All of them should make sure that they don't do. And while in a transportation problem, I listed the capacities here that we were constraining the row totals by, this one, I want to have this in an input place up here, and I want to reference it so that there's an easy location where I can just make a change. So that maximum number of jobs that an employee can do is 2. So I'm going to reference that cell. Might be 3, but I'm going to reference that cell. In fact, I'm going to absolute reference that cell so I can copy it. So I'm referencing that 2, absolute reference to it, so I can copy it. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm making sure every employee, or I should say no employee can have more than 2 jobs. Knowing that, what's the logical operator that should go in between these 2 things?
Less than or equal to.
Yeah, less than or equal to. So we want to make sure that's less than or equal to, can't get more than 2 jobs. Okay. That's one of my constraints. Okay. That's, in this particular context of this problem, the constraint is that the assignments per employee, they can't get more than 2. So that's one of the constraints. Now I also have to make sure that every job gets done, okay? So I'm going to make sure that every job gets assigned. And so what do I do in this cell to make sure it's assigned? Or to calculate whether it was or wasn't assigned, I guess I should say.
So.
Yeah, sum them up. Just like we did in a transportation problem. We sum the rows, we sum the columns. We're always going to do that. Every transportation assignment problem, we are going to sum the rows and we're going to sum the columns. Because there's a constraint associated with each. The context of that is different depending on the problem. Like in a transportation problem, the constraint of summing the rows was to make sure you didn't exceed capacity. The constraint of summing the columns was to make sure you met demand. Okay, so the context is different, but you have a constraint on the rows, on the column summations. Okay, and in this one, it's that requirement that every job gets done. Okay, so I'm going to reference in this what's required. I'm going to reference this 1 up here. Every job must be done, so it has to be done, and only done once. These are unique jobs, not recurring jobs. So I'm going to absolute reference that cell that's before. And if I want to make sure every job is exactly done one time, Okay, then I'm gonna put what
Equal.
logical in there, yeah, I'm gonna put an equal in there. And okay, so set my two constraints up. My total time to complete the jobs, of course, is my objective, but what do I do to calculate the total time that it takes to complete all jobs? Yeah, okay. And some product of what?
Pay rent range with the group.
Yeah. All, in this case, all the times that it takes and all of the whether or not they were assigned. Because remember, what's gonna be in these cells are a bunch of zeros and ones, so when you're multiplying, you know, zeros just, they're nothing. When they actually is assigned, then that time, this is times one, that time gets added in to the total time. Okay, so it's the sum product, but it always is the sum product of that blue and red matrix. Okay, we're done with that. That's a matrix problem on the spreadsheet is easy to do. What will make this one difficult has to do with this right here, all these scattered and disallowed paths that we have to figure out how we're gonna account for. So has everybody had an opportunity to kind of bold those in some way? Did you work on your spreadsheet and kind of get those bolded? Because you have to have a way to recognize them, to visually be able to pick them out. Remember, there's two possible things that you could do. One, don't include them in the changing cells. That's actually the way I'm gonna do it. Or two, make each one of them an equal to zero constraint. And you can't do them that all at once. These two you could do together because they're next to each other. These two you could do together, but otherwise, you're gonna have like 10 new constraints saying this has to equal zero, this has to equal zero, and you may or may not remember what you did last. So none of this is fun. It's all tedious when it comes to these kinds of disallowed paths. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go into Solver, and our objective function is what? What's the objective? Yeah, the total time to complete the jobs. And we're trying to do what? Yeah, we wanna get this done as quickly as possible, so we're trying to minimize that. And here comes the fun part of this. Okay, it's not fun. But here comes the part I'm gonna do with the changing cells. I'm gonna hold the control key, and I am very carefully and methodically, so that I don't miss any, gonna go through this. And I'm kinda gonna do it column by column, sort of, like for instance, I'm gonna do the first column, but not pick up that one, and go the rest of the way down. I am gonna pick up columns 2 and 3 together, because I can. Okay. 4 and 5 together where they're above this, but then 4 below. You notice I am avoiding those highlighted cells. That's why I needed to be able to see them easily. So I'm avoiding them right now, and I'm doing this very systematically and carefully, because if I don't, I can start over again. It's a mess. But wherever I can, I group as many as I can together, and it still makes sense to me what I'm doing. Like rows 2 and 3, columns 2 and 3. Okay, I made a mistake there, but I'm gonna go back and pick them up this way. Columns 12 and 13, I should have done all together. So that's so annoying, and if you mess up, well, depends how you mess up. If you exclude something, well then just choose it next, okay? But if you include something you shouldn't have, you're probably gonna start over again. It's awful. Okay. Make sure that, okay, that's it. Just make sure you carefully carry that out, because right when we're done with this, I'm gonna show you what we would rather do in this kind of a problem. Now I'm gonna add my constraints, and again, it's always the same 2 constraints. I mean, there can be more if we modify the model, but it's always the same 2 constraints. It's just the context of the problem is different. It's the row and the column constraints. My constraint is that the assignments to, you know, how much is assigned to any given employee has to be less than or equal to 2. That's my row constraint. My column constraint is that all jobs, the assignment, you know, of all jobs has to be exactly once they have to be assigned one time. So that row has to exactly equal to this row. Okay, that's where yours are exactly, so I'm not saying cell references because I think I have maybe an extra row in here somewhere. And that's it. The row and the column constraints, that's it. My changing cells are awful, okay? Make sure this is simplex. And and I'll show you, as soon as I solve this, I'll show you how you know if you got those entered in there correctly. So when I solve this, first of all, if it's not feasible, I'm happy, okay? But when you look at these highlighted cells, they should not have 1 or 0 in them. They should not have 1 or 0 in them. Every other cell should have a 1 or a 0 in it. And so here's the thing with this. If you accidentally picked up one of these, you'll see it because it'll have a 1 or a 0 in it. If you accidentally forgot one of these other ones, it won't have a 1 or a 0 in it, and you'll be like, round 2. You know, go back, try to put your changing cells in more carefully and everything else. And the only other solution to this would have been, I mean, if in the matrix form, would have been to say, okay, I'm going to list every single one of those as this cell equals 0, this cell equals 0, this cell equals 0. And that's not fun either. That wasn't going to be fun either. So when you have a problem like this, oh, and just so you know, if you did yours correctly, you should have 263 as the optimal solution. The best time that you can get with these people, these jobs, 263 minutes. Okay. Here's what would make this problem a lot easier. If somebody took the time to put it in this form right here. Because if it was in this form right here and they took the time to put the data in this way, it would not include the disallowed paths. I mean, you can't take disallowed paths out of a matrix because you just can't. They're all there, you know? But you can take them out of a list. Like if you look at this, we don't have the employee 1-6 combination or the employee 1 job 14 combination. We don't have 2-6 or 2-9 or whatever's next. You know, we have, this has been structured in such a way as to take those things out already to get it all set up nice and neatly. And all of that would have actually been done before this was put in here. Okay. And now we're ready to do this in the list format. And I will tell you, I did already in your file name these columns, and they're named what you see at the top of the column. So this column is named employee, this one job, this one time, this one assignment. That's going to make our life easier. So when you are doing the list formulation, naming the columns does make everything that you're about to do easier. It really does. Okay, so do we still have to constrain the employees by no more than 2 jobs each? Do we still have to make sure all the jobs get done? Yes, we still have to do that. So I go into this where I'm checking and making sure that everything that was assigned to employee 1 does not exceed 2. Like they can't have more than 2. So what do I do now in this cell right here? What calculation? You do the sum if. Okay. And the range that I'm looking at to compare against my criteria is what? So which one? Yeah, A, which I named. I actually named. Okay, so it's employee. Okay, I did name that full column employee. And of course, I'm looking at which employee. Well, on this row, 1, and the next one 2, and the next one 3. Okay, so I'm using a reference to this cell, which will change. And my cell may not be in the same place as your cell. Okay, look at your worksheet to decide what that should be. Okay, that reference to where employee 1 is there. And what am I summing? What range am I summing?
Oh, the assignment.
The assignment. Because think about this. What do I sum? What do I sum when I'm in a matrix? The changing cells. I sum the rows, I sum the columns. I'm always summing the light red cells. No exception here. I'm summing assignments because I need to see how many assignments were made to employee 1. Okay. And because I named those ranges, it makes those absolute references that don't have to worry about dollar signs.